So, welcome to the Adventures in Learning podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Diane, and today we are welcoming an author who has become a favorite of mine, and I know she's a favorite of elementary school teachers everywhere. This is Beth Ferry. She currently has a book out called Christmassy Cactus, and I'm really excited about the upcoming Solar Bear, but you'll also know her from Stick and Stone and so many others. So, Beth, welcome to the Adventures in Learning podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So when I met you, you were at the Shenandoah University Children's Literature Conference. And one of the things that struck me is your fascination with words. Can you tell us what your two favorite words are?
You know, it's funny because I think about this more than I probably should. Like, what's my favorite word? Because you don't realize you love words when you're young. You know, you love reading, you love books, but you know, you don't really stop and think about like most things. Like you love cake, you don't think about the ingredients, where obviously books are words. And I can't really remember, you know, the day that I was like, oh, I love words, but I do, you know, you can love them for so many reasons, but anticipation, right? I mean, it's just like such a big, like, you know, there's such good words, love and hope and home, but anticipation is, because I think that those are my favorite times in life, right? Not when you're doing it, but when you're anticipating it. So for that word, for that reason, for the meaning, I love the word anticipation. And I also, and I think I talked about this, like the word vehement. And I love that word because it's a great meaning, but it's also like hard to attack. You know, and the first time you're probably meeting it is when you don't know how to pronounce it or what it means.
Right.
And so you're looking at it and you're just like, and I think those become your favorites because, like, I don't know, it feels like you've mastered it, right? You've like figured out how to pronounce it. You know what it means. You don't really use it a lot in life, like, right? Maybe in writing, but not in speaking. But there are, you know, I just sometimes when you read a sentence, right? Not even one you've written, but mainly one that you're, you know, reading in a book, and you're just like, how it's like magic, like those certain way there, you know. Words are just words. Anyone has access to them. But when someone puts them together in like the right order, and you're like, wait, can I read this out loud? Is anyone here that I can read this out loud to? Because it's so beautiful. So yeah, I don't know. I just do. And I feel like all writers must love words, right?
Right. And good teachers get us inspired to love those words. You know, I was thinking about when I was in third grade, I had this teacher, Mrs. Ledbetter. And when we had space and time, she would send us to the dictionary with no assignment, but just to read the words and find one that you had to use at least 3 times that day. And
you know what
so
I love? And that's gone, right? There's no more
gone, but loquacious was my word. When do I use loquacious in a sentence?
Never.
But as an 8-year-old, I loved that word.
And you know what else too? I think that like the mastery of vocabulary, not just words, but vocabulary, it seems like when you're a writer, you're always aware of age appropriate, right? You know, you need to use age appropriate words. Well, first of all, what does that even mean? Because like even, you know, kids are in such different ranges.
Right.
But I always do. I think like, you know, if they don't know it, what a great opportunity. You know, if they come across a word that they don't know, and I mean, I hope, and truly, I have no idea. Like when I see a word I don't know, I look it up. I always do. Does everyone do that? Probably
I don't
not.
know.
But context, you know, it's another way to like, you know, just in the context you can get. But what a gift to like, I don't know, just like treat words like a treat.
And
like,
that's exactly how she treated them. And I feel like good writing does that.
yeah, it does. It makes you interested. It's like, oh, what, or even just spelling, you know, spelling, like the English language is such a, you know, combination of so many things. And I think like, oh, you know, sometimes when you're like, oh, where did this word, oh, it came from this, like so far away or so long ago. And how even, and I want to say, and I can't remember the word now. Is it nice? Is the word, was it? It wasn't nice. I'm not going to think of it now, but it was something that was such a negative word. And now in our culture, it's a positive word. And I don't think it was nice, but it was something like that, something so common. And I think like, oh, fascinating, like just how it evolves through the centuries.
Right. And I know you didn't write this, but you turned me on to the book of Obscure Sorrows and the words in that book. Exactly. It's just amazing to spend time thinking about language.
And it makes you want to come up with your own words. Like that's the thing. When you read this, you're like, a lot of them are, you know, portmanteaus where he just takes 2 words and puts them together, but some he just like kind of just changes the spelling of a regular word, but the way he defines them, I know it makes me want to write my own dictionary, which how fun is that?
Well, and thinking about STEAM and kids learning, what a great opportunity for them once they sort of have mastery of what their vocabulary words mean. Can you create new words? How do you create new
Right,
words?
right. And I mean, even when you start looking like, so, and I can't remember now, I can't remember why I was doing it, but you can see what words, because I guess published dictionaries, they can't print all the words, so they have to decide. But even online dictionaries, they delete words every year and they add words every year. And I think like there's a job, right? Like decide.
Right. Well, and it gets you thinking about that book Frindle from all those years ago, where
right.
he called a pen a frindle and went through this whole campaign to turn it into a word.
Funny, right? Oh my gosh, I haven't read that book. I should really reread that book.
Yeah, Andrew
Sometimes, yeah,
Clements. It was such a good book.
yeah, and it just like I love books that make you think in a way that you've never thought before. You just don't think that way. And I think when you're young, you just know what's in your circle. You're probably maybe now. I mean, it's so different now. Like kids are traveling the world when they're, young. But when you're, years ago when I was young, we, our biggest vacation was like going to New York, and we lived in New Jersey.
Right.
So we didn't go very far. And so, it was your environment that defined almost everything that you did. And so, now I feel like it's such a, bigger world for kids. There's
Absolutely.
exposure, everywhere. So yeah, it's very cool.
So let's talk about your journey from that smaller world to the bigger world of books. Tell us a little bit about how you became an author. What were your adventures in learning to get here?
It's so funny because I do feel like so many authors have the same journey. Like we love to read, but for me, I did love to read, and I was an English major in college because I was like, wait, I can just read books, and that's college. Like, okay, without any plan at all. Like I had no plan. Like, what was I going to do? I didn't think I wanted to be a teacher, so I just was an English major with no plan, which I think so many, like now, like when my kids tell me, like one of my kids, their majors, peace and justice studies. And I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds a lot like an English major. Like, what are you doing with that? Right. But I just was like, I don't know. It just seemed like the smart thing to do to pursue something that you loved. And then when I graduated, I was like, oh, I'm not really qualified to do anything, or I'm qualified to do everything. Right.
Right.
But I didn't, I thought about publishing for a very short minute when I looked in the paper back then, and it was like, they paid nothing. It was like $12,000 a year. I was like, that doesn't, even then it wasn't a lot of money.
Right.
So so I basically, my first job was out of college, like in the registrar's office, like just doing cool, like certifying students for graduation. And I got my master's in education while I was there, but still never wanting to be a teacher. And then again, I'm taking a long time getting here, but I had kids and I rediscovered picture books. And I was like, wait a minute. And I say rediscovered, but I don't even remember. I remember books, but I don't remember what I think of like the classic defining moment of a child on your lap at bedtime. And you're like, there's nothing honestly more intimate than that. Like you're sharing a book that you like, they like, there's just, the magic involved in that. I don't remember that as a child. I remember books, but not that. But when I did that with my kids, and, I guess, this was in like the late 90s, very early 2000s, and the books that I was reading, Room on the Broom and Little P, and I'm sure I off the top of my head I can't come up with any.
Seven Silly Eaters.
Yes, just like books that everybody loved, and I thought, oh, this is something, like this is just something. And I was like, I want to do that. But of course, I had 3 kids and they were under 4. And so I wasn't doing that for a while, but blah, blah, blah. I stayed home with my kids for a long time. And then when they were growing up, I was like, you know what? It's like now or never, basically. And I was like, I'm going to try. And so that really, I think my youngest was in 7th grade, and I thought, I'm going to try to write a picture book. And so I did. I wrote a lot of really bad picture books. And, I joined SCBWI, which is truly like the story of all my friends. Like, this is how you do it. You like learn the hard way and you think you know what you're doing. And because, if you're well read in the genre that you're writing, you're like, what else can you do? Like, I'm
Right.
reading all, and so that seems like it should be education enough, but, it's not. And I wasn't really thinking about it as a business. I was thinking about it as a passion. Like, I love this. I want to make someone feel the way that I felt when I read, Library Lion, like that kind of thing. So, but, and that takes learning. And I did, and I learned. And then I thought I have to treat this like a job. And so I started to write every day, and I just was right. And I started to realize that my comfort zone is long, but you can't write long. So I started to give myself limits on the number of words that I allowed myself to tell my story. And then I wrote Stick and Stone. And when I wrote it, and I wrote it at first in prose. So, and I think it was just, I don't know, 600 words. And I was like, it's too long. So then, I said, let me try it in rhyme. And once I wrote it in rhyme, obviously, and, they're not even complete sentences, but I was able to tell the story in very few words. So that was my long journey. And I told it in a very long way.
You know what? That's okay. You're allowed to. And I have to tell you, I used Stick and Stone this summer with some library kids. And when I pulled that book out, they just glowed. They knew the book. So
nice. Yeah,
they were so excited.
It's such a, like, even hearing it never gets old. And, it's really, sometimes it just feels like it's beyond you, and I think like, oh yeah, like I wrote that, and yet it seems so long ago. And yet every time I see it right now in your background, and it like makes me smile.
And that's one of the things about books is you write and the illustrator illustrates, and then the reader comes in and they make it their own, and it becomes a different kind of transaction.
It's so true. It's such a great point, because it seems like, it's so obvious once it's done, but it's not. You don't know who your illustrator is going to be. You don't know what the art's going to look like. You don't know how it's all going to marry together. And yeah, so it's such a like fantastical experience when you first see the illustrations and you realize, oh, this is what my book is now.
Like with Swashby in the Sea, I've been using that one a lot this summer because I've been doing professional development for teachers. And so one of the things I'll do is I'll have them at lunch. I give them these special pens and they write down all the terrible things people have told them about teaching. We're not paid enough. It's too hard. For early childhood educators, you're a babysitter, or you play all day. And then what I'll do is while they're at lunch, I go in and I take a permanent marker and I go over the positive words. And then these are friction pens. And so I use heat when they're back and we erase all the negatives and it just leaves the positive words there. And then I read them Swashby in the Sea to show them the power of words and of making a difference.
Okay, that's amazing. Like, that's amazing. Okay, wow. I love that. Wow.
And they love the book because then they're thinking about, okay, how can I bring this message to my children? And so then they're taking it in and they're bringing it back to the classroom so that they can read it and talk about the power of our words and changing our messages. So it's just a cool way to take your book and add that STEAM edition.
I love that. Well, and it's funny too, because I thought when I was writing it, I was like, oh, I'm going to have a worksheet that goes along with this. And, I'm going to give I'm going to try to come up with, similar to Now Vanish and I couldn't, it was very hard. I thought this was going to be really, even writing the book, those parts would be so easy, and it was way more challenging. And I never did it. I couldn't actually come up with I wanted 10 examples where I could say to the kids, okay, here's a sentence. Now guess, I couldn't do it. It was hard. So
it is hard. And hard. So this worked, and it's definitely a really interesting way to get them to do that.
And it's creative. Yeah, it's creative. That's what I love. It makes you think differently.
Exactly.
About what you're doing. So good for you. That's awesome.
And you do lots of author visits, I'm assuming, and you get to do classes. So what are some of the fascinating, surprising, unexpected ways you've seen teachers using your work?
You know what's crazy? You don't see that. That is the truth. You don't see teachers using your work because you're really there for an assembly. And so, you're not, you never get invited I never go to the classroom, and sometimes you'll see art. Like I've seen some ways that the art teachers have, used, but I don't really ever get to see, you go in, you talk to the kids, like some of their questions are amazing, but I don't know how they use my book. I really, it's sad.
So maybe that's something we need to change on author visits is to invite you into a classroom.
Right. And so you can see, because like what you're saying now, like maybe that's happening. And yeah, I know Stick and Stone, they use them for, like kindness and how to stand up, which is, I know that just from, Instagram posts and things, but yeah, I don't know that. I would like to know that.
So we now need teachers to start tagging you when they're using their books.
Right, exactly. To know, right. It's because I'm sure it's way more creative than I would ever come up with. Like what you just said, I love so much. Like I want to like somehow use that. But right, like because my youngest child is starting her first year as a teacher, as a dance teacher, but still like, so she's like, she's so young and she's in a like 2 to 8 school teaching dance. And so she has so many grade levels and, and her big thing is like, she's ordering like every book, every picture book she can find like on dance. And it like brings me like
I
great
love
joy.
that.
She's like, I need like a library in my classroom. Even though we're dancing, I want kids to know that there are books and that they can take and borrow and read about dancing. And it makes me so happy.
Tell her to look for Corinna Lucan's ABC and You and Me. It's an alphabet book and it's yoga and the bodies are in all the different shapes of the letters. It's such a cool book. It just came out.
All right. I have to write it down now. ABC, You and Me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Yeah, that's cool. So the bodies make the letters?
The bodies make the letters and it's adults and kids working together. And it's
Oh,
just
awesome.
so adorable.
Okay. Awesome. Oh, that's fun. I'll get it for her. I won't even tell her. I'll just get it for her.
Because she'll like that.
Yeah, that's nice. Awesome.
So then you've got a couple of new books coming out. I know right about now you've got the Christmassy Cactus. Tell us about that one.
Okay. So, yeah, I know I have it right here. So I just got my author copies, which, again, this is the kind of stuff in life that you don't, joy, joy, right? You have kids, joy, but when you get your book, I swear, I truly think like there's really nothing better than holding it in your hand. And so, and I can't remember what, this is the other sad thing. I don't always remember why I get an idea, but I decided that I was going to write a story about a cactus who was like a pet. Like, I feel like I have pets, but I also treat my plants as pets. And so the idea is that the cactus is a pet of this little girl and she's beloved by her little girl until her first Christmas, where everybody, gets busy. And so she keeps waiting. She just sees the house transformed and all the decorations, and she keeps waiting to be decorated because everything's decorated. And the Christmas tree, which is also green, is decorated. And so, she's like, well, any day now I'll be and of course she doesn't get decorated. And so she has this, like, she lives on a bookshelf. And so she reads all the Christmas books and she's like, wait a minute, you can like make a Christmas wish. And so she has a wish to be decorated, but again, it never happens. And then finally at the end, like, I don't really want to give it away because the end is my favorite part, but it all works out for her. And it's funny because it's really hard to break into holiday books because there are so many classics and great ones. And so, your publisher's mainly reluctant, to do a holiday book, but I really, how like I love Halloween. I love Christmas.
Yes.
I'm like, I really want so I've been working for years to try to, and I finally have a Christmas book. So I'm super excited about it, but it's really about believing in yourself. It's like, she's waiting for something to happen, but you can't just wait for something to happen to you. You have to make sure that it happens. And so it's that hopefully like a little bit of empowerment, to go do it yourself if it's not happening.
Well, and that seems to be a common theme from your books is sort of that sense of empowerment and connection, that all of your characters have sort of a sense of humor, but there is that sense of sort of standing up for yourself and standing up for others.
I think when you first start writing, you're whatever, you have your ideas, whatever I really like to write about the beach because I love the beach. Like you have to, they say like write what you know, but which I totally agree with. But then I also love to do research about like silly things that I know nothing about. And, but I also, you can't kind of help it, right? When you write, you don't even know that you're kind of doing the same thing. Like sometimes I'll look and I'll be like, oh, friendship book, friendship book, friendship book, friendship book. Oh my gosh, I have so many friendship books. Like I don't even like mean to. Like sometimes you're not even meaning to write a friendship books, but that's what you write. And so now that I have like a number of books, it's funny to look at them and I see like sometimes, oh, these are the themes that obviously are important to me, even if I don't really know it myself. I can
Yeah.
see it just from what I write.
And so
funny.
let's talk about the Solar Bear book then.
Yeah.
That feels like it's a little bit different than some of the other books.
And it's my first, it's, I don't even want to call it like an environmental, activism kind of a book, but it kind of is. Like I read it. Didn't I read it? Did I
I
read
think
it?
you did. Yeah. And if you
Did.
want to share a little bit about it here, feel free.
Yeah, I wish I had pictures. I don't have pictures. Yet. It's like, and this is the other thing. It's coming out in March, and I'm kind of like, when are the pictures going to be done? But it's basically, I was, watching a video. I think it was a video of a polar bear, a very thin polar bear, like swimming in an empty, no, and you read it all the time about there's so many things that can break your heart, right? Especially in nature, with global warming and where we are. But this picture just struck me. And, I just can't help but playing with words, right? And so it just seemed so obvious to me, like polar bear, solar bear. And I thought, what happens if there was a bear who could actually glow and shine his light on all the problems that are affecting nature? And so
Yeah.
it's like a call to action for kids just to be aware, like that all our actions have consequences. And it's such, I think when I was writing it, you get that sense of inspiration, but you also get that sense of, wow, what like it's a big problem, and how I don't know how we're going to solve it. And you'll hear such great, even the way that we're so like into like just solar, like so many people, solar cars and solar energy, and you're like, oh, we are making strides. But then you read about like the number of even frogs like just going extinct in the it's heartbreaking. So
Yeah.
anyway, it was my way of just like calling attention to, we have to, we should be bigger than ourselves. Like we are not just ourselves, we're our planet and, all the other species that live here. So yeah, it's sad, but hopefully inspiring.
Well, and I think we do have to start speaking up for the animals who can't speak up for themselves. I was just reading in the Times that entire emperor penguin colony was wiped
Yeah.
this year because they didn't have enough sea ice, and so none of the chicks survived.
Okay.
And they don't know yet whether that's a continuing thing or whether it was a blip, and whether they'll be able to move into other colonies. But it's the kind of stuff we've got to pay attention to and amplify, at both poles.
And I think part of like, and I remember when my kids were young, and I think 9/11 happened when my kids were very little, and my husband and I had like a big conversation, like, do we tell our 4-year-old? Like, do we?
Right.
And we like, and that's the same thing. Like, it's like how you want to protect them, but and yes, maybe 4 is a little too young for something like a terrorist attack, but you want to protect your kids from the bad. But the truth is, like, it's how is that, the environment and things that they have to grow up knowing that we're in a climate crisis, and they can do things. And so like that's where picture books sometimes are their first exposures to things in a gentle, beautiful way, that where they you can start a conversation even if they're in kindergarten or first grade. And so yeah, it feels, I don't know, if I hope it feels important to me, because again, I know there's so many books out there that do it, but for me, I had never done it. So I feel hopeful that it might make a difference.
Oh, well, and I'm sure it will. One of the things that I've been talking to teachers about is you never know what that book is that's going to be the connection book for a kid. You
It's a
present
great
them with lots of books that are windows and mirrors, and you don't know which book it is. So that's why it's so important to share a variety.
I was just having a conversation with a first grade teacher who's a friend of mine. And she was, she was like, oh, we were talking about my book. She's like, oh my gosh, I haven't read your last few. She's like, I don't have time to read to the kids in the day. And I was like, oh,
Oof.
right. And I don't know anything about, the curriculum and things, but it really was, it was like, it was sad. I was like, oh, you don't even have like, and most picture books, really are short.
Right.
You can, read them in less than 10 minutes. And I thought, oh, wow, to not have time in your day to read a book, especially when you're in elementary school, it just seemed really sad to me.
Well, and it's counterintuitive to the research as well, because there's so much research out there that shows the benefits for kids of reading aloud, not just at home with their families, which is incredibly important. And I don't want
Right.
to minimize that at all. But when you're reading aloud in the classroom, you are providing that vocabulary we talked about earlier. You're able to read words that maybe they wouldn't be able to read on their own, but they're able to start learning them. You're able to connect to content. You're able to build those connections across the curriculum. And it's really a good investment of 10 minutes
Yeah.
of your time.
I totally agree. I don't, and you wonder, like, is this just her? Is it the whole school? Like, I mean, I don't know enough to, and I
Right.
wasn't going to ask her, but it does
No,
make me wonder. And, you think like so many schools vary, some schools like, do value it so much that they do it as a school. They have and
right. The
so
one book.
right, exactly. And it's such a gift. And, as a writer, of course, I value that, but you think like, none of our kids are getting equal education, every school, there's no, every school can be doing, what, or is it, I don't even know their school board, what their priorities are, or is it the principal or, you don't, but, you
Right.
could,
And then
one,
you've got
even
the
in the
state
same state,
curriculum stuff,
right?
and it's hard and it's challenging for teachers, and it certainly has not gotten easier. But
Mhm.
if they can find the things that'll bring joy back into the classroom, I truly think reading aloud is one of those
I
things.
do too. I know I do too. And there's so many schools like that you do, they have the author visits because they know that that is meaningful to say like, yeah, this is written by a real person who like can come and tell you, why they love books. And that's, because you do write in, a little bubble, you're home, you need quiet, let's be honest, right? You're not like writing, you're thinking and you're reading out most every author I know reads their stuff aloud. So, you need to be, but so you're not reading in front of children. So when you get that chance, like it's such a gift
Yep.
like, to read your book to kids and see how they react. And, I don't know. So yeah, I love going and sharing, because that's who you're writing for.
Absolutely.
Half the time you don't ever, not you don't ever get to do it, but you don't get to do it as much as you should be doing it.
Out.
Good.
So tell me a little bit about what you're working on right now.
Right. So now I am working on a novel in verse, which, is really my first novel. I mainly really do write picture books, and some graphic novels. And it's a big challenge, but I also think like as a writer, you do have to challenge yourself. Like, so your genre doesn't have to be your genre. You can write in other genres. And so I'm writing a novel about a middle school. It should, be middle school-ish. You're never really sure exactly till you're done, but it's really about being happy for others and sometimes how hard that is, to be happy for someone else's, achievement or success. And I feel like there's, it's such the, not obvious type of, and problem, it's something we don't really talk about. But when you notice someone's not happy for you or doesn't come to your event or your soccer game, and you think, and how you feel about just someone not supporting you. And so it's, I'm enjoying the verse because it is a little like poetry, but not. And I'm also enjoying the idea of having kids. Sometimes we do things without thinking about them. And until someone points it out to you, you're like, oh, I didn't even know I was doing that. And so I don't know. I just feel like this is an important part of growing up. And the ability to be happy for someone else is a gift. it just isn't.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm hoping, so I'm working on it. So, and it's really a challenge because it's way out of my, like word count comfort zone. Like, so,
Well, it
it's like,
sounds exciting though.
yeah. So yeah, it's fun. And I'm really, I'm liking where it's going. So we'll see.
And what's currently bringing you joy?
So, September is my favorite time to go to the beach. So it's almost September. Everyone will be gone, because I live, I can ride my bike to the beach. So I live like, 15 minutes from the beach on a bike and 5 minutes in the car, but the traffic. And so we don't go on weekends. We don't, like Labor Day, we would never go. So that always, and now I'm in this thing of like looking for sea glass. Like, so, there's just, it's like this little bit of treasure. It's like going on a treasure hunt. You're just walking and there's shells and stones, and then you'll see this like beautiful piece of sea glass. So that is currently bringing me joy, sea glass.
That's awesome. And then last question for today, what brings you hope for the future?
I think our kids are so smart. I think that's the one thing that when I go to school visits and, like you'll be talking to a first grade and, because I'm not a teacher and I'm not in schools and in classrooms all the time, and they'll ask me questions or they'll know what alliteration is. And I think like, yeah, we're going to be okay because they're so smart. Like they want to learn, then they do care. They're so, and if that can just like, if, again, I think social media is the death of our society, but I'm hoping that, that's going to be figured out and our kids are going to be like, none of my kids do it. They have outgrown it because they realize how damaging it is. And so I'm hope that even gives me hope that they figure it out on their own. And, that's the only thing. I think there's so much information and we're such a global society now. And I think that gives me hope that, our kids are going to be smarter than we are. So
gives me hope too. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Adventures in Learning podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And everybody check
questions.
out Beth Ferry's books. They are wonderful. And you should definitely look for Christmassy Cactus and for Solar Bear, which will be coming out in March of next year.
Awesome.